Greg Pope, thanks so much for being on the podcast. How are things?
Thanks, David. Fantastic to be here today. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, great. Hey, we met through FEI, Finance Executives International, and interesting, it was at a fractional CFO dinner, and I thought that was really cool because, one, there's just so many folks that are getting into this world of fractional CFOs, and when I heard about the things you've done in your background, I just thought, this conversation would be really great to have and provide a lot of value to our audience. So maybe just quickly giving us a little bit about you and your background, just so folks kind of know, where you're coming from.
So for me, I've been in the CFO chair now for over 14 years. I've lived and worked across Canada and worked in multiple different industries, private, public, family-owned. So it's been a rather eclectic career along the way, but it's been a ton of fun, and I think I've learned a thing or two along the way. So it's been great. Thanks.
Yeah, the industries you've been in, which are really kind of unique and have their own nuance, but you've been able to learn and, I guess, adapt to a variety of industries. You've got the retail side, that's its own thing. Healthcare, where I come from, certainly that's its own thing. IT, restaurants. How were you able to adapt to those different industries and sort of navigate those transitions?
And you're right. They're all very different. I started my career in telecom. I had a ton of fun doing that. But I always believed that the finance function was something that was portable, if you will, to different industries. And after spending 11 years in telecom, as someone who I just love to learn, I felt that while I learned a bunch of great things in telecom, that there were also fun things to learn in other industries. And that's when I joined Boston Pizza and got in the restaurant business. You're right. It does take a change. There's lots of learnings that come with that. For me, as you noted, I've worked in multiple different industries, but inevitably, anytime I moved into a different industry, I found myself working with individuals who were lifers, if you will, in that business. And nothing wrong with that. They bring a fantastic expertise to the table, but I often found those people were skeptical, if you will, of me coming in as an outsider. So I worked very hard right out of the gate once I started the new role to partner with all the various different stakeholders at all levels of the organization to quickly learn the business, learn the nuances of what's going on in their worlds, what's going on in the industry, and quickly find ways to demonstrate my ability to add value. I found with that, people would then start to see me as the partner that I wanted to be. And that in turn led to the future success that I've been able to enjoy so far.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on do you think CEOs, when they're hiring their CFO, over-index on the need for industry experience? What's your perspective on that? The folks that you obviously met with that brought you into those organizations, you thought you would bring something relevant and that you can learn what was needed in that industry. What do you kind of find the general view is out there as far as wanting industry experience? I think most want it and probably over-index on that. What do you think?
For CEOs that I'm meeting for the first time, I usually find that is a bit of a precursor to whether they do want to work with you moving forward. You're right. So I would tend to agree. People do, and CEOs tend to be that over-indexed, to your point, on industry knowledge. Those that I have worked with previously or have other experience with realize the value that a CFO that is knowledgeable, capable, and ultimately will partner with and allow them to see around corners far exceeds the industry experience and recognizes that a good CFO will be able to quickly come up to speed in that industry and add value. I do find that industries themselves, like for example, manufacturing or financial services, probably does require a little more industry experience, or at least within that genre, than perhaps some others, which is fair enough. I understand that. But for the most part, I think being able to demonstrate ultimately that partnership, foresight, and strategic ability from the CFO should over-index. But oftentimes, you're right, sometimes industry trumps.
And beyond industry, the other aspect, and you've seen, I think, the range as well between public company experience, uh, private equity owned. Like that's again a unique scenario that requires a certain skill set and know how to operate within, and then sort of owner managed, family owned business. How have you found navigating those and having been a CFO within those various settings? What are some of the different kind of experiences or qualities in terms of navigating those?
And you're right, they are all quite different. I think starting my career in the public world really helped shape and form the foundation of how I approached the rest of my career. Working in a $2 billion publicly traded telco was one where timelines are really tight and you better have your numbers correct because those numbers are going to go out to public markets. And if they're wrong, bad things happen. So it quickly taught me the importance of people, systems, and processes, and making sure that you have fantastic structures within each of those three categories to ultimately be able to deliver. So for me, it really set that foundation of making sure that I was able to deliver timely, accurate financial information. And when I say timely, it was often pretty tight. I was used to having full financial statements done and completed on day 3. And it really helped shape how I brought my vision of finance forward as I moved into other structures later. What was different is then as I moved to private equity and think about that world, now the shareholder actually has a face, and recognizing that those individuals have to provide a return for their investors. So it changes the dynamic from that perspective. In a public environment, you're working closely with the CEO, the executive team, and making sure that you have your strategy aligned with your board. But now it becomes a little bit different in a private equity world, whereby not only do you have the stakeholders of your exec team that you're working with, but the CFO typically has a direct line of communications, if not reporting specifically, to the PE firm. And now you have to make sure that everyone is aligned in what they're trying to achieve, which isn't always the case. I've been in many situations where the leadership team and the CEO want to go one direction, the PE firm wants to go a different direction. And this is the stuff they don't teach you in business school, because you really need to become your a quality leader and being able to walk that tightrope of trying to get everyone on the same page and ultimately see what the best vision for the organization is. And then in turn, when you go into a family-owned environment, it gets that much more interesting again, because now not only does the shareholder have a face, but it's their investment. And if any cash is going out the door for any reason, well, it's their cash, and you need to remember that. So, treat the money as though it's your own, which you should do in any case. But in this particular environment, you can actually look at the people whose cash it is. And, you often get family dynamics coming into play as well, which adds another interesting dynamic too. So it really comes down to, in all of those environments, recognizing the people dynamic and the role that the CFO plays in trying to manage that and help, corral everyone to make sure that you come on the best possible path and strategy for the organization.
Would love to maybe dive into some of the experiences you've had, like really impressive names of companies that are household names and folks would know, and then the transactions along the way that you were engaged with. So I think Pizza Hut was one example when you were with Redberry, and I believe you worked on a sale of the Pizza Hut division and raised significant financing in that setting. Would love to just hear a little bit about your experience in that regard.
Yeah, thank you. Both were fun and both very interrelated. They're good examples of the executive team sitting back with the board and thinking about what the long-term strategic direction of the company should be and where we wanted to focus. The culmination of that was in part the disposal of our Pizza Hut business, as well as recognizing that the growth opportunities that we wanted to pursue were going to require some significant incremental capital moving forward. And both of those items fell to me as CFO to make sure that they got done. And as you know, David, it's never a sure thing that you're going to be able to get the sale of any business over the proverbial finish line, let alone making sure that you get the sale done with the return expectations that you've promised your executive team and your board. So being able to do that and really making sure that you pay very close attention to the details. I mean, let's face it, the devil is in the details. And in my experience, it's those details that will sink you if you don't pay real close attention to those. So making sure that you are heavily involved in reading everything and making sure that you're heavily involved in that. Just like, on the financing side, when we wanted to raise that additional capital, you've got to work closely with the bankers. Again, the PE firm, at least in this case, the PE firm ownership wanted to be heavily involved in that, which was fantastic. We wanted to make sure that the future modeling that we were doing for the business, the covenants that we were agreeing to, were ones that we could live with and were ones that were going to help make sure that in partnership with our financing syndicate, we were going to be able to deliver that growth for the company going forward. So really it is about sitting back, considering the execution of the strategic plan, which you've helped craft as the CFO, and then delivering on that for all the shareholders and stakeholders involved. It's not always an easy task, and it's a lot of fun.
So a lot of forward-looking strategic there in terms of where are we going, what is our long-term plan, and what are the steps along that journey to execute on that plan. Mm-hmm. But it's also understanding the broader role of a CFO. You need to have the foundational aspects down and the backwards looking piece and the reporting capabilities. And so there's just many facets to a CFO role. And then I'm just thinking back to, because you were with Fairfax, I think there were retail outlets like Golf Town, Sporting Life, Toys R Us, some really great brands that you had worked within. Talk a little bit about your experience as a CFO in those settings, and how your time needs to be focused. Because again, it's about where you're going, but there's a bigger story, bigger picture that you're overseeing as the CFO. Would love to hear your experience in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. Golf Town was a new experience for me. That's where I started my journey with Fairfax. They had recently acquired the business, bringing back the Canadian assets into Canada and setting up a new executive team and office here in the country. So as I mentioned, people, processes, systems, none of them existed when I came through the door. I was the lucky beneficiary of the new executive team that they were setting up, coming in as the new CFO. And, I sat back, I did my first set of monthly statements, David, in Excel. They were wrong, and quickly identified for me the need to quickly move on, as I say, all three aspects, the people, processes, and systems. Right out of the gate, I started to put in place a new accounting system that we would have to have sometime over the next 12 months. And while obviously, trying to implement better reporting along the way and not waiting for the end of that system to get implemented, if you will, making sure that you hire a good team, but not overhire. So it was always an interesting juggling to try and determine exactly what the right size of team was going to be for that business. And looking at the processes, which were really critical at that time. I once had an old CEO or former CEO that I had worked with tell me to follow the cash. And that's exactly what I did when I joined that business. Just watch all the cash as it came in, customer interaction, how that cash showed up in our systems, and then in turn, follow that cash out the door. Understanding exactly the flow of that cash allowed me to identify numerous opportunities for process improvements along the way. It was a long list. And at that point, you just stand back and say, okay, which one of these are going to provide the best return that I can implement quickly, the proverbial low-hanging fruit, and you just start knocking them off as best you can. So it really was trying to build the people, systems, and processes along the way in conjunction with the overall growth of the company to make sure that we were delivering the value for Fairfax as our owners as best we could. It worked out very well. I was later promoted to take on the CFO role at Sporting Life and Toys R Us, also a ton of fun. And lucky me, my promotion took effect 1 week before we closed every store across the country for COVID, and I lost the vast majority of my revenues. So knowing where my cash was a really good learning for me as I moved into those roles at that time.
Wow, couple days before.
About a week. Lucky me.
Okay. Well, can we go down that path? Let's talk
Sure.
COVID. I mean, in maybe no other setting was it as significant. I shouldn't say no other setting, but when there's literally people walking into your store and then suddenly they can't or won't.
Mhm.
What was your experience like? How did you navigate that?
David, I'd tell anyone that I'm thrilled that I had the opportunity to manage through COVID, and I hope as to heaven that I never have to do anything like that again. It was a great learning experience, and I did as most CFOs did at the time. I just locked everything down. Payroll was first and foremost, and beyond that, it needed to be a special case for cash to get paid out. You may recall that originally, when stores closed for COVID, that golf was not an approved activity. Golf Town was impacted just the same way as every other retailer across the country at that point in time. So it really was, you look back at the biggest expenses that we had in terms of, paying suppliers, paying landlords, and paying staff. Staff were by far most important through that. Again, just like most CFOs did. And after that, it was really trying to make sure that you partnered with all of your stakeholders, again, suppliers, landlords, et cetera, to say, hey, you know what, we're all in this together. And if you can be a little flexible with me, we'll be flexible with you, and making sure that ultimately, we were going to get through this together. I know I had many conversations with my stakeholders, again, suppliers and landlords, to say things like, you know what, right now, I'm sorry I can't pay you. I've done my cash forecast. I'm going to be comparing to that, on a hourly, if not daily basis. And I promise that if things are better than what I'm forecasting, I'm happy to share that, because again, we're partners. And I'm a big believer in making sure that it's never just about one party. Everybody needs to win. And, as it happened, when golf did become an approved activity, things did improve a little bit from what I had modeled, and I was able to share some extra cash with our suppliers and landlords and other partners to make sure that, as I say, we all got through it together. Ultimately, as we started to come out of COVID, I think our partnerships were stronger as a result of that. So I thought it was a pretty good success story at the end of the day.
Yeah, like no one saw it coming. So you're kind of writing the playbook while you're in it. Mm-hmm. But I suppose going forward, you would know how to navigate that. And kind of here we are in the situation with tariffs. It's almost like another one of these nobody saw coming. Mm-hmm. Maybe a few months now that we've had this warning, but a little bit of uncharted, unprecedented territory where the playbook just may not be there. What were lessons that you would have taken from COVID or your experience in general that would inform how you navigate today as a CFO?
I mean, you're right. I mean, the world that we're in right now, to call it tumultuous is it's an overused term even over the last couple of weeks. And I'm a big believer that CFOs have to help their executive teams and their boards see around corners. But to your point, I'm not sure anyone saw this corner coming not that long ago. So it's tough. There's no doubt. As I think about the experiences that I've had, and I would help manage any executive team and board through this, is that it comes back to technology. And again, all the people, processes, and systems. We're fortunate as things have evolved. Certainly in my time sitting in this chair, we all have much more access to data than what we've had in the past. But there's a big difference, as you know, between data and information. So I think as any company right now sits back and considers what impact tariffs are going to have on their business, regardless of industry, is get as much information as you possibly can. How are sales trends being seen in your business? Where are your customers? What data can you glean from the systems and processes that you have in place that will help you predict and have a vision to inform your stakeholders as to what might be coming over the next days, weeks, and months? And then in turn, you, as a CFO, you sit back and say, okay, let's consider the various different models. Let's think about what the worst case scenario is, what the best case scenario is, what the most likely scenario is. And by the way, if we all sit around the table and talk about the black swan event, can this be that much worse? What if tariffs increase, heaven forbid? What does that look like to the business? and try to think about in advance where the implications of those various models lead. Because it's not about the numbers that come out of those models, it's about what you're going to do in that situation. So I think it's absolutely critical right now for CFOs to sit back, do that scenario planning, look at all the information that they have at their disposal, think about ways that they can get new information that perhaps yesterday they weren't receiving, but will need to think about this new world that we are in right now, and then help prepare their executive teams and boards to say, based on these various scenarios, here's what I recommend we start thinking about.
Super helpful. And I think the sort of data versus information is probably a big step for a lot of businesses to take. I suspect, and a lot of companies that I come across, the data is not as much the problem. Some of them, the data is the problem. Mm-hmm. So, yep. Whether they're on the wrong, they're on a cash basis of accounting, or they can't just generate reliable data. But let's assume that we get there. Now they've got all this data, and it's sort of like, now what? Right. And how do we use that to enable the business? So I guess on that note, sort of technology is an enabling factor. AI is a big part of that down the road. I don't think we're quite there. We're just talking about it, and maybe it's starting to show up in certain areas. But it all comes back to information and enabling the business. And the CFO tends to, I think, lead that charge in many respects. So,
agreed.
Yeah, would love you to kind of just take that step, talking about technology as an enablement for finance and for organizations more broadly.
And you're right. It's fascinating to see the evolution of technology, and it's only going to continue to pick up pace. I'm not sure any of us really can visualize where AI is going to take us, and I'm confident that 5 years from now, it will look very different from today. And 5 years from then, it's going to look even more different from what we could possibly expect. What I would recommend to any CFO is embrace technology. It is there to help. Don't see it as the enemy. And what will be critical for CFOs, to my earlier point, is that I think it's only going to provide the opportunity to get even more data. And it's going to be critical for the CFO to be able to parse through that data very efficiently and find what's information. Being able to cut to the chase and see what truly is important for the business going forward is going to be where the CFO will be able to add value. If the CFO ignores technology and tries to just, let's hope this whole AI thing is overblown and never actually happens and just goes away, that's not a recipe for success, in my opinion. Embrace the technology, look for the opportunities and how it can help you, and consider how it can give you potentially a strategic advantage, maybe over your competitors who haven't embraced technology in the same way that perhaps you have. I try to think of it as an opportunity and always try to look at where those opportunities might lie.
And so if being embracing technology is one of the, I think, core really requirements of what I would call the modern CFO, or the evolution of CFOs, definitely now encapsulates technology. What other, would you say, trends in the CFO role in terms of, what makes a really effective CFO today versus maybe, earlier in your career? How have you seen that evolution?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen right now is around people leadership. I grew up in a world where you were in the office 5 days a week, and that was probably a minimum. Now that has changed completely. And being able to attract and retain talent, which is by far the most important of the three of people, processes, and systems, you really do need to be much more adept and forward thinking as to what your team needs, who are in many cases, in my case for sure, younger than me, and have different needs and requirements. Just this week, I was on a 7:06 train heading downtown, and it was remarkable to me how few people were on that train. Fast forward a couple of days, I was on the same train heading downtown, and it was 10 after 9 train leaving my stop, and the train was full. And I was absolutely amazed, because pre-COVID, it would have been standing room only on that 7 o'clock train. And you would have been able to fire the proverbial cannon through the 9 o'clock train for the number of people that would have been on it. I'm fortunate. I've got two great kids who are both now professionals in their own right. And I was talking to them about it, and they said, yeah, because now, companies have to be recognizing the fact that people didn't want to give up their ability to drop their kids to school, for example, in the morning, which we just, did differently pre-COVID, or other various commitments that they have at home. And it was a great learning for me that I had. And, as I look at them and their evolution, and in turn, managing my own teams in the past, things have changed. And if you're going to attract and retain top talent today, you have to be cognizant of that, in my opinion.
And go to where they are, or bring them to where, or get the 9 o'clockers onto the 7 o'clock train.
You know what? It took me a while to come around to it, David, but ultimately what's most important is that they're doing the job. That's most important. And I usually find that those who are most engaged are the ones who are doing the best job. And if that means that they've got to drop their kids off or get to a doctor's appointment or get to a soccer game in the afternoon and would prefer to log on in the evening to get the job done, that's okay.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think it comes back to engagement. Like if you've got the right people, then that other stuff doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. You need the right people and have them engaged, because the world is different.
The world is different. Absolutely.
We have to adapt, for better or worse.
Correct.
I do think there's silver linings, from the pandemic. Our ability to connect like this on virtual conversations. I think the sort of right balance, and for every business that probably looks a little bit different, but certainly hiring is hard. And
again, it can be a strategic advantage, because if you are prepared to grow with your team and grow your own leadership, in terms of how you expect and work with your coworkers, that can be a strategic advantage over your competitors who perhaps aren't being as considerate of their staff, and gives you the opportunity to attract that top talent once again.
For sure. And another way to look at it is for those individuals in the workforce that are thinking about how to differentiate themselves. Well, the 7 o'clock train is a good way to do that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So there's another way to stand out, which is to sort of buck the trend. And so I think, the great way to look at everything here is that there's sort of opportunities if you've got your eyes open. If you're stuck in the way you've done things, or why is it changed, instead of resisting change, hard to see the opportunity in it. And even the tariffs that we're talking about right now, as hard as that is to see, I do think for certain companies that take the right steps and evaluate kind of what the paths are in front of them, there's an opportunity to be in a better place. It might get worse before it gets better, but I do think that that's ultimately an opportunity. Wherever we get to would only have been made possible by going through this.
Let's make sure we learn from it and make us all better off, both individual corporations as well as Canada as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. Amen. Speaking of crisis, that's very different when you're operating in a crisis mode or you've done turnarounds versus the high growth company. And both can be very challenging. But just talk about how, when you're wearing the CFO hat in one or the other, how that looks different.
You're right. It is a challenge in both environments. It's interesting in terms of the similarities between the two, actually, in that either way, cash is king. And it doesn't matter if you're the small startup just getting your legs under you, or if you're a large publicly traded company. Cash is finite. You've got a bigger dollar number if you're the large public company, but it's still a finite resource. And there are demands on that resource. And I usually find either at work or at home, there's more demands on the cash than what you probably have available. So what I've seen in the past is that if you're in a high growth environment, the demands on the cash are coming from oftentimes, the board leadership to reinvest the cash back in the business, get the ROI on those new revenue opportunities, and grow the organization accordingly. Fantastic, 100% agree. But what often gets heard is from having the business case to support growing the back office to continue to support the growth of the business. So if there's an opportunity to get an extra 10 million of revenue by making the investment of X dollars, there's going to be a lot of pressure to make that investment than it is to invest in a new accounting system, for example. And it becomes very hard to provide that balance and selling capacity to be able to say, hey, we got to make the IT system better as well for us to support the growth going forward. In a turnaround situation, yeah, it's different. You need to know where every dollar is, which I guess applies to both scenarios. But in a turnaround, you are accountable for every nickel that goes out the door, and you need to be prepared as CFO for getting the question from the CEO or a board member to say, why did you make that payment? So again, being able to know where the cash is and know exactly the opportunities and risks that you have associated with each payment is critical. Where I found the biggest difference between a growth and a turnaround was actually nothing to do with the financial aspect of the business per se. It was actually around talent. If you're in a high growth company, everybody wants to be a part of your business. Everyone knows that you are on fire, and when you advertise for a role, for an opportunity to join your organization, you have more resumes than you could ever possibly imagine, and you have your pick of top talent. In a turnaround situation, when you need to hire someone, boy, the list of applicable candidates and interested candidates is a whole lot smaller. So trying to find the best talent to join you through that difficult time gets really hard, along with trying to maintain the morale of your existing staff. When you're in a high growth environment, every day feels like a party. Morale is sky high. Everyone feels great. There's lots of team lunches. Everybody is celebrating success, hopefully, and enjoying the riding of the wave. When you're in a turnaround, boy, it's a whole lot harder, because you got your AP folks who are taking calls from suppliers saying, when are you paying me? When are you paying me? When are you paying me? You've got the exec team saying, how come results aren't better? Can we find some cash to pay this particular individual who's calling the CEO because they have a personal relationship there? So the people management side that the CFO is in between those two environments is very different. And again, it's a great learning, but again, comes back to those soft skills that you probably didn't learn in business school.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think cash is king is a great call out here in both up on the way up and on the way down. Like, that's the critical lifeblood that you got to keep your eye on. But I guess it's a lot more fun on the way up than the way down. Mm-hmm. But I guess one could argue the learnings are, equal, if not greater, on the way down.
100%.
So
yep.
Maybe on the talent side and trying to attract or retain folks through those experiences, that's the sell. It's like,
exactly.
You're going to come out of this with a ton of experience that will really help you, on the next way up or down. And so that's an interesting thing that I think we find ourselves in the finance world where, you might want to cut everything, including your finance and CFO on the way down. But, finance is generally the last thing you need, or the first thing you need, the last one you need standing on the way down. And hopefully those things turn around as well. So you've recently made this move into the world of fractional. What led you, to make that decision? And how's it going so far?
I'm having a lot of fun. Thank you, David. I've gotten to meet great people like you along the way. It's been great. For me, as I decided to make this move into fractional, I've been very fortunate through my career. You've kindly pointed out some fantastic organizations that I've had the pleasure of working with. I've had some fantastic mentors along the way that have helped me grow and become the CFO that I am today. As I sat back and thought about what I wanted to do next, there's a lot of great companies out there that are just getting started and find the need to get the benefit, I guess, of those of us who have been down this road before and have built some great experiences along the way, but aren't of a size where they need a full-time CFO, but they want to get there. And for me, at this stage of my career, I would like to be able to give something back, work with some of those either newer CFOs or CEOs who need a strategic partner, an advisor, a consigliere, if you will, that they haven't had the opportunity or don't have today in the business. And for me, if I can work with those organizations, give them the benefit of some of my learnings along the way. Ultimately, the reward for me is seeing those organizations and people grow. To me, that is so rewarding, a ton of fun, and I'm looking forward to being able to do more of that going forward.
Fantastic. I think you've got a ton to offer, and we just need to get the word out to more businesses. I think that may not know what they don't know, that there's folks like you that can help.
Absolutely.
And I think that could be really transformative. You've also spent a lot of time at a board level, and I'd love to hear a bit about your perspective and experience sitting at the board level.
I've been very fortunate. I've been on and around boards since my mid-20s, so I was very lucky from that perspective. I've learned a ton working with multiple different boards over the years. In 2017, I completed my ICD designation. I had some people say, "Gee whiz, Greg, aren't you a little early in your career to do that? I mean, you work full time. You're just swamped with your own full-time permanent role." But my opinion was that I could be a better CFO if I knew what my board was thinking, and in turn, thinking about what's coming down the pipe that I should be thinking about, not only as a CFO, but as a member of the executive team, so that I could help lead my organization as effectively and as efficiently as possible. For me, that was a fantastic experience. As I think about other CFOs who perhaps aspire to move into board roles going forward, if you haven't had the opportunity, and for that matter, even if you have had the opportunity to work with a not-for-profit board, I would highly, highly recommend it. After I got my CA designation just a couple of years ago, I decided to do some of that work, and it ended up being a 20-year partnership that I was involved with a large national not-for-profit, and I learned so much. The people around the table both helped me grow as an individual, as well as just, again, learning the intricacies of a board and some of the difficult decisions that a board can face. It is very different sitting on the board side of the table versus the management side of the table. Your expectations change. And for me, I was a much better person coming out of that experience, and would highly recommend that if other CFOs haven't had that opportunity or taken that opportunity in the past. If you put your hand up with a not-for-profit that makes sense, my guess is that they're going to accept your offer. So that would be recommendation number one, David. My other recommendation would be networking. It's not something that comes that naturally, I find, to people who have gone through the accounting profession. There's a lot of introverts, as we know, in this profession. So it doesn't always come naturally, but networking is great for meeting people who provide different perspectives. It's incredibly rewarding. I like people. I like meeting interesting people, and you never know where the conversation goes. And if you want to find yourself on a board, then people that you are networking with who may be involved in board themselves or know others who are can be incredibly beneficial as well. And worst case, even if they're not, you've met a great person and you've probably learned something along the way. And that's not a bad thing.
Yep, couldn't agree more. I think it should be taught in schools.
Networking
and as a sort of a continual journey, not sort of break glass when needed, type of network, when you're looking
exactly
for a job, but just always on. You mentioned your CA, by the way, that sort of was your tell on it not being that recent. What advice do you have for newly minted CPAs, I guess now, or those thinking about getting into the profession? What do you tell those folks?
My recommendation to anyone, early in their career, and it took me a little while to learn this, David, but is look for opportunities. And oftentimes when I say that to people, they think of it as an opportunity to be promoted. But what I'm actually referring to in that is that, as you know, promotions come after you've done the work and demonstrated your ability to do it. I've made a career of seeing opportunities in an organization where something needed to get done. No one was doing it. And far too often I've seen others put their hands in the air and say, not my job. But if it needs to get done, then there's an opportunity. Go do it. The example I'll use is from one of my retail days, where I discovered as CFO that we had missed a $100,000 tenant inducement. We signed a deal for a new lease, and the landlord was going to give us $100,000 to renovate within a certain period of time, and we didn't do it. We lost $100,000 of cash right out of the gate. And we didn't because nobody was managing real estate. So I said, okay, someone needs to manage real estate. What do I know about real estate? Absolutely nothing. Not a thing. I never had any involvement whatsoever. But I learned. And I made sure that we never lost a tenant inducement again. Next thing I knew, I was at the table driving the conversation around our leases, what was coming up for lease, which stores were profitable against when leases were coming due, what square footage rent deals did we need to negotiate in order for stores to be profitable. So it opened up a spider web of opportunities for me, and in turn just helped build my repertoire and things that I had and could bring to the table for other opportunities down the road. So that's the advice I would give anyone.
Great advice. And then how about advice, or I guess, advice. What would you tell yourself, and we'd like to ask this in each of our episodes, personally and professionally, looking back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
You know what? Trying to have balance is important. You know, my kids would tell you that they went to sleep each night listening to me clack away on the keyboard, as I continued to work away. And that's obviously important. You know, you've got to work hard and demonstrate your value and worth to the organization to build your career, for sure. But, you know, it's important to have balance with however you define balance yourself, you know, your family, personal time, etc. But I often find for me that taking the time away from the screen, the keyboard, etc., I often find that that's when some of my best ideas come to light. Things strike me that, you know, when you're in the proverbial muck and trying to work through it, you're just trying to get through the day. But if you take the time to stand back and give yourself the opportunity to consider new ideas, that's when you're really demonstrating your value add, as well as, again, having some balance and having a little bit more time with your kids, your family, your hobby, or whatever your passion may be. I could have done a better job of that early in my career. And I think I would have been better off on all facets of my life, to be quite honest. So I'd like to think I figured it out a little bit later, but wish I'd done it a little bit sooner.
Well, thanks for sharing that honest and I think relatable for many in this profession. That experience. And so it's never too late. So I'm glad you're finding that more so now. Yep. But, you know, again, back to silver linings, like from the pandemic, just this opportunity, I think, to reflect a little bit more, to reset, and I think even find new ways to work, including, you know, this world of fractional, I think presents that opportunity a little bit more readily than, you know, the traditional way that we've worked. So even personally, like we got the COVID dog. And so now, whereas my daughter promised to be, chief dog owner and caretaker, I'm the dog walker. So every morning.
Shocking.
But yeah, exactly. I hear I'm not the only one. But then, you know, you start to value that time and that sort of time Absolutely. To think and reflect. So I couldn't agree more. Hey, Greg, this has been super valuable. You have tremendous experience and background and skills, and I know you're going to do great work for your clients. So congrats on this new foray and new venture for you, and look forward to continued collaboration. And so thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you very much, David. Enjoyed the conversation and look forward to chatting more.